Imagine that on a single quiet Sunday, Canada undid more than 7 decades of American economic supremacy without firing a single shot or signing any pact. It was not a threatening announcement, but something much more impactful. A simple phrase spoken by Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney caused great confusion in Washington. No more. With those words, Canada ended a dependency that for years had fueled the industries of Michigan, Ohio, and Texas, and did so with surgical precision just as Donald Trump, already in the presidency, intensified his rhetoric about the trade war, while the White House celebrated the imposition of new tariffs on foreign products, believing it was defending American workers. Canada launched a silent plan it had been preparing for years, cutting the supply of essential raw materials and creating its own national manufacturing network, breaking the industrial chain that the United States had always considered secure. The Build Homes Canada program is not just a housing policy but a strategy to reindustrialize the country, regain its economic autonomy, and at the same time expose the structural vulnerability of the American economy. In 2024, Canada spent over $847 billion on processed goods in the United States, products made from raw materials that originally came from Canada. This relationship, which many considered symbiotic, revealed itself as a trap. Natural resources like wood, steel, and aluminum crossed the northern border, were transformed into finished products in U.S. factories, and then resold at high prices to Canadian consumers. Carney not only ended this system, but did so at the worst possible time for Washington. According to experts in global trade and economic policies, the United States is facing a reconfiguration of its international relations that could bring the entire world economy to a tipping point. With the goal of achieving complete industrial independence, Canada began processing its aluminum, wood, and steel domestically, using them to build more affordable, faster, and climate-resistant modular homes without depending on American inputs or investors. Meanwhile, processing plants in key states that Trump promised to revitalize face material shortages and the possible loss of thousands of jobs. Political observers and international relations analysts agree that this is not just another conflict but a complete rewriting of the North American economic map. What do you think? Do you believe these policies truly protect American workers or only increase pressure on families? Share your point of view in the comments. Your opinion is essential in this debate. While Trump positions himself in the White House talking about tariffs as if they were precision weapons, Canada has already implemented a strategy that does not require direct confrontation to cause damage. The Build Homes Canada program was not presented as a trade war policy but as an internal reform to solve the housing crisis. However, behind that social narrative lies a master economic policy move that has begun dismantling a crucial part of American industrial infrastructure. Carney's plan centers on the complete relocation of the entire value chain, from resource extraction to final manufacturing, all within Canadian territory. Experts say this is equivalent to Saudi Arabia deciding to refine all its oil domestically, a decision that alters the dynamics of global economic power. The impact is already evident. American factories that processed Canadian aluminum for decades now suffer drastic cuts in their raw material. Steel plants in Pennsylvania, sawmills in North Carolina, and construction plants in Texas have long depended on the steady flow of northern resources, and that flow is decreasing. According to international trade analysts, this affects not only production but also employment, construction costs, and the competitiveness of the United States in the global market. On the contrary, Canada has managed to transform its housing challenge into an unprecedented industrial boost. Mass-produced modular homes, resistant to extreme weather conditions, with costs up to 20% lower than traditional constructions in the United States. What worries Washington the most is that these homes can be manufactured and assembled year-round, without suffering the seasonal delays that affect construction in northern United States. This means that in the coming years, Canada could begin exporting these homes to other nations, even competing directly with American builders within their own territory. Several experts already warn that Carney's plan poses a greater threat than any multilateral trade agreement, presenting itself as a model that can be replicated. Countries like Mexico, Australia, and various European nations are exploring the possibility of implementing similar strategies, breaking the link that has kept them tied to the American industry for decades. Even some Congress members privately acknowledge that the risk is not exclusively economic but also geopolitical. In other words, this movement could trigger a new order in Western international relations, where the United States ceases to be the predominant economic axis and becomes just another player that must compete on equal footing with allies who previously depended on its infrastructure. In this scenario, the tariff policy appears more as a desperate gesture than an effective solution. It remains to be seen whether this decision will strengthen the United States' position in global trade or end up benefiting rivals like China and Europe. We would love to hear your opinion in the comments. The debate starts with you. Amid this economic crisis, what confounds many Americans the most is not just the loss of contracts or the rising prices, but the sense of betrayal by an ally that for decades was considered the most reliable trading partner of the United States. From the times of the Free Trade Agreement to the current deal, the relationship with Canada was always perceived as stable, predictable, and in some way subordinate to Washington's interests. However, Mark Carney has shattered that image with a coldness that has left political analysts perplexed. What was once an alliance now seems a carefully planned strategic break, and the most worrying part is that everything has been completely legal. By presenting these reforms not as foreign trade measures but as internal economic policies, Carney protected his initiative against immediate retaliation from the World Trade Organization or international courts. While advisors in Washington try to dust off sanction manuals and tariff lists to punish Canada, they face a paradox. There is no clear violation of trade rules. Canada simply stopped exporting raw materials to favor its own national production. The White House may threaten to impose more tariffs, but any open retaliation against an internal housing program could be seen as unjustified interference. Some observers point out that the only real alternative left for Trump is to try to lure his allies back with incentives more attractive than those Canada offers. But that would imply something his administration has avoided for years: ceding power. In states like Michigan and Ohio, where voters massively supported Trump's return promising industrial recovery, frustration is growing. Factories face material shortages, construction costs have skyrocketed, and many small and medium businesses await a response from Washington that does not come. What is most concerning is that other countries are already taking note. If Canada can reindustrialize its economy using its own resources and increase its productive capacity without depending on the United States, why couldn't Mexico, Brazil, or even European allies like Norway or Sweden do the same? This puts at risk the entire economic model that the United States built during the 20th century, in which it was the nerve center of global processing. The great irony is that this transformation has been driven precisely by the trade pressure policies implemented by Trump since his first term. Aggressive tariffs, forced renegotiations, and the rhetoric of industrial supremacy have pushed his partners to seek independence. Some analysts suggest that Trump, unknowingly, has accelerated the decline of American dominance. Some see this as a brave step toward economic security, while others consider it a risky gamble. What is your opinion in this intense political debate? Leave your comment and join the conversation. This is where things get even more personal. We are not just talking about million-dollar contracts or macroeconomic theories that seem distant to the average citizen. The reality is, in Detroit supermarkets that are beginning to raise prices because materials to build new stores, shelves, warehouses, or even homes for their employees no longer arrive with the same speed and regularity. We refer to factory workers in Ohio who receive early dismissal letters because the flow of steel from Canada has been redirected to plants in Toronto or Edmonton. We talk about families in Texas discovering that their new modular home will cost 25% more because the Canadian competition that once helped lower prices is no longer present in the U.S. market. Meanwhile, in Canada, factories operate at full capacity, building homes even in Arctic regions, as demonstrated by their alliance with Nunavut. If they can manufacture and deliver houses in frozen and remote territories, they have the capacity to do so anywhere in the world without depending on the United States. Canadian analysts argue that what began as a simple program to mitigate an internal housing crisis has transformed into a global strategy with profound geopolitical implications. While Donald Trump insists on using tariffs as the main tool to punish countries he considers disloyal, Carney's administration responds with a diplomatic smile, aware that every dollar invested in modularity and industrial sovereignty is a precise blow to the manufacturing heart of America. But there is an even more unsettling factor for economic advisors in Washington: speed. Canada is not thinking in terms of 10 or 20 years. They are already manufacturing 200,000 units a year, closing contracts with new private investment firms and absorbing jobs that once crossed the border. The creation of a $13 billion fund was not just an allocated budget, but an invitation for national and international investors to join a productive model that does not depend on Wall Street, Silicon Valley, or the logistics chains of Florida or California. And to add to this, a protection fund of $1,500 million was created, designed to prevent so-called U.S. vulture funds from buying properties in Canada. This is not just a defensive strategy, but an impenetrable barrier. Carney is shielding the domestic market to prevent foreign capital from turning housing into another speculative asset in the New York style. It is a vision of a sovereign country that no longer accepts being seen as a resource reserve for others' growth. How does Washington respond? With urgent meetings, veiled threats, and rumors of diplomatic retaliation, but without concrete actions, because international relations experts warn that confronting Canada directly would be diplomatic suicide. Losing the support of the only stable and reliable neighbor in a moment of global tensions with China, Russia, and OPEC is not a viable option. Moreover, several legislators within Congress acknowledge, though not publicly, that this Canadian move exposes the accumulated failures in U.S. internal infrastructure and housing policies. While Trump boasts about projects that have yet to materialize, Canada already has factories delivering homes that are built in less than 3 weeks, with Canadian materials, Canadian labor, and at prices the average American can only imagine. This is not just a turning point for the North American economy. It is a clear warning. If the Canadian model works, and so far all data indicates it does, there will be no turning back. Europe watches, Mexico analyzes, Australia takes note, and meanwhile, the American middle class, the one Trump promised to protect with his trade war, is beginning to wonder who is really winning: Washington or Ottawa, the workers or the shareholders, the nation or the speeches. Carney did not need to insult, build walls, or impose punishments. He just changed strategy, and that was enough to reveal how fragile the system the United States believed unbreakable truly is. In this new era, where every nation seeks to protect itself against global uncertainty, Canada has made its move with surgical precision, and the United States, despite its military and economic power, is learning an unexpected lesson. True independence is not proclaimed, it is built. Do you think these policies are really protecting American workers, or are they creating more pressure on families? Share your opinion in the comments. Your perspective is essential in this debate.